All right, everybody. I think that we are live. Just like to say hi and welcome to everybody. My name is Kevin Laughlin. I'm owner of Wildside Nature Tours. And today we're starting off with our second webinar in our new series. And this one will be with Lee Hoy. Lee owns Big Bend birding and photo tours. He lives right outside Big Bend National Park. And is quite familiar with that area. And he joined the Wildside team a little over a year ago and has been co-leading trips with me to Costa Rica and the Amazon and other places. So we're really excited to have him on board. And with that, I will turn this over to Lee.
Cool. Thank you, Kevin. You know what I like about these webinars?
What's that?
I had to put on pants.
Yeah, well.
I know.
This has been home right now. It's a whole new thing for a lot of people. So that's why it's great to have these webinars in the afternoon too. So give people a break to do all their work and a reason to have an afternoon cup of coffee and sit back and relax. And well, Lee, just have at it.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Welcome, guys. I'm glad y'all have joined me. I hope today is going to prove to be fruitful for you. It's impressive to see the number of people who are interested in making their photography worse. The reason I like to do tongue-in-cheek is because sometimes it kind of helps keep our attention a little more, helps us realize some of the bad habits, patterns of behavior that we've developed over time regarding our photography. So today I'm going to walk you through some habits that if you develop them, I promise they will make your photography worse. Feel free to throw up some questions at any time up there. Kevin and Sally, another moderator, are going to help keep me alert if you guys come up with a good question. So if I'm going too fast, if you're having trouble understanding, if I go over a topic too quickly, please take a second and ask a question on there using the chat. Hello, guys. I see Wayne and several other folks. April, hello. How are you all doing? Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So without further ado, I'm going to go, instead of looking at me, because this is the best I look. This is with an extensive amount of time of prep work. And so I share with you the best I have to offer. But because that's the best, I'm going to head right on over to our slides. And I am going to pull up and we're going to get started today on our top 10 ways to make your photography worse. So the first habit, the first way that I promise that you can make your photography, well, you know what? First, I need to talk about myself, don't I? I got to share with you about my beautiful home here in Fort Davis, Texas.
Photography worse. So the first habit, the first way that I promise that you can make your photography.
Someone's gotten to
I need to talk about myself, don't I? I got to share with you about my beautiful home here in Fort Davis, Texas. Photography worse.
Can you all hear me okay, Kevin? There was getting some feedback there. Not sure who that's off of. So on Fort Davis, I want to share with you a little bit about my home. The image on the left there is the view off the west side of my deck. And the image on the right is my home in September. That's when the Milky Way is vertical. And so I literally just walked out my front porch, set up my camera one evening, and took a shot of the heart of the Milky Way there, right above my little cabin here. I live at 6,431 feet up. I don't have to have air conditioning in Texas, and you know that's probably pretty rare. So here's our first habit on how to make your photography worse. Make sure to always take an image in the exact same position. Whatever you do, don't change your elevation, your approach, the legs on your tripod. I call it the iPhone pose, and I think most of you know what I'm talking about. It's this. And everybody holds their camera to eye level, even if they have it on a tripod. If you go to a popular photography destination like Bosque del Apache in winter, if you go to some shorebird hotspots in summer, I want you to watch at how almost everybody is set up at the exact same level, and it is normally their eye level. What happens is in a lot of images when we shoot at eye level, it starts to get boring because it often becomes predictable. So changing position, again, if you want to make your photography worse, never change your position. On the flip side, if we want to make it a little better, let's start changing our position. For example, here's an ant I photographed on our Costa Rica photography workshop. I'm kneeling down. to get at the same level of this ant. At this level, we enter the ant's world. If this was a top-down shot, it would be our world. So by getting down at the ant's level, I bring you more into his world. Most of us don't lay down on the ground to get eye level with ants. I often do. Kevin will tell you I'm the first one to get in the mud, lay down, get wet, get soggy. But this is one of the first things we can do. But if you want to make your photography worse, please keep your your tripod fully extended. Keep it at the same level, because we know it's aggravating to change levels or positions or spread the legs out. So whatever you do, do not do that. Or on the flip side, you might lay down on wet sand on the Galapagos Islands and have a warbler hop up almost within arm's reach, and you get this beautiful eye level shot, which if it were taken standing up would be very boring. All of the sand would be in focus. And here you see, I knew I was going to get wet. I knew I was going to get sandy. But one of the beauties of using the Olympus system that I've been shooting with is if I get sand on it, I just pour my water bottle over it or hold it under a sink to rinse it off. So no problem there. Another thing you might do is look up. Now, I was fortunate enough to get to stand by this Asian elephant just a couple of weeks ago at the Hill Country Elephant Preserve. And if I wanted to shoot the elephant's eye, I pretty much had to look up. I'm 5'7" on a good day. So looking up, though, gave us this really neat dimension, a really neat approach in looking into the eye of this elephant. And, if I just stood back, I stood a ways away and shot some full frame shots and whatnot, but none of them really brought me in to this elephant's world. Here, I've excluded a lot of material, and by looking up, I've kind of brought us into the same level as that elephant's eye. You might also try kneeling. I talked about kneeling earlier. This big-headed anoa was also in Costa Rica. I knew I wanted to try to capture a certain image. I wanted the light to just be primarily on the head, leaving the rest in a little bit of darkness. And a lot of people stood up and shot down on this, but to get this view, it almost looks like the anoa's head is coming right through the lens at us. You can even see the reflection of my flash diffuser in its eye. The image is bringing us again into the anoa's world, not into our world. We really get a chance. So one of the tips I would suggest for you on this habit is wear knee pads. Yeah, you look goofy. I mean, I walk up to national park visitor centers wearing knee pads, my big summer hat, my macro lens diffuser, which looks crazy. And it's when I get asked the most, "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing?" Because I'm sure I look ridiculous, but you know what? I don't care. I'm getting the images I want. So first habit, if you want to make sure your photography gets worse, is never change position. Don't worry about laying down. Don't worry about kneeling. Don't worry about adjusting the elevation of your tripod. Just keep doing what you're doing. Let's talk about part 2, the second habit of how to make your photography worse. Whatever you do, never, ever read your camera's manual. I mean, the last thing we want to do is figure out how to use that $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 tool we bought. I mean, we bought it. It should know how to do everything. Just press the button. And I'm the first to admit owner's manuals are generally not very exciting. They're written by technical writers. I'm also the first to admit that as a man, I actually read the owner's manual a lot. So I want you to never open it up, never take a look, because if you do, you might begin to learn some of the really neat features of your camera and some of those fancy things that it does that will help make your images even better. For example, this bat was in a termite mound, maybe 5 feet off the ground. You had to lay on your back in the mud, shooting upwards. You had to either hold a flashlight or have someone hold a flashlight for light. And at that point, you really don't have time to fiddle fart around with your camera to figure out how to get it to manually focus, because autofocus is tough in this situation. I autofocused and then I fine-tuned with manual. Knowing how to do that, because I'd read my owner's manual, was very simple with the Olympus. But there are going to be a lot of features that your camera offers that if you never read your owner's manual, and again, I know they're not fun, but we're quarantined. What a better time to sit and invest a few hours or more in reading your owner's manual. True story. I have read the Olympus OMD EM1X's owner's manual not once all the way through, not twice all the way through, but 3 times all the way through. And I am still learning and still making adjustments to my camera to refine it for the use that I want to put it in. So another feature I could learn about by reading the owner's manual with the Olympus is it'll do a pro capture mode on high, up to 60 frames per second. Well, if you don't know, the marine iguanas in the Galapagos Islands, to get rid of the excess salt in their system, they will blow it out their nose. Now, with a typical camera, it would take tremendous amount of luck to do this. But because I'd learned what Pro Capture Mode did, I'd learned how the autofocus with that worked. I knew that if I focused on the head and that I half pressed my shutter button, that it was going to put 25 images in buffer. And then as soon as I fully pressed my shutter button, it would record those images and keep recording at 60 frames per second, okay? That is incredibly fast. And twice, within a matter of 5 to 10 minutes, Kevin was with me. He caught it using his Olympus system. We were able to both capture images of the marine iguanas blowing the salt out their nostrils that you see there. But had I not bothered, there was another couple of people on the tour that had Olympus cameras, and we were trying to help them because they hadn't read their owner's manual. Of course, they're paying for a photography workshop, so that's what they want to learn. But by learning it, you'll begin to realize, oh my goodness, my camera will do this. And even just as important is if I want to use this feature, there's this limitation. Another feature I could learn about was live composite mode. Oh my gosh, is this a heaven send from Olympus? What it does is it will actually take a base picture and then record after that only brighter pixel values. So it's perfect for doing star trails. This is off my deck. You can see there's an iridium flare. I don't know if you see that up here. Polaris, the North Star. A meteor came through. And I just set it up on my porch, let it go. It took 540 images over 3 hours at that base exposure. Set it on my tripod. I came in the house, relaxed, and then went back out when it was done and looked at my image. I learned all that by reading that owner's manual. Okay. Another perfect example. Most cameras nowadays have an interval mode. They vary tremendously in what they're able to do. But with the interval mode and time-lapse function on the Olympus, and again, Canon cameras, Sony, Nikon, almost all of them have it. They function a little differently. That's why you need to read your owner's manual. But I'm going to give you an example of what you can do. I shot 631 images at a 2-second interval. That means I used this exposure, 1/20th at f10, ISO 50, and every 2 seconds I took a picture. Of course, I had to set the camera on a tripod, and this was the result. No, I think it's lagging a little, isn't it? Here we go. Come on. Yeah, let's see here. Come on. Well, it's supposed to be a straight 25-second clip, but it's wanting to flow. But you get the feel. There we go. By reading my owner's manual, I was able to discover this process, set it up. There we go. Now it's going to flow smoothly for us and get this shooting in a, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Watch the God rays as the light changes, as the storm moves across Big Bend National Park. Had I not read my owner's manual, I wouldn't have been able to get that set up and in place in time to get that series of shots. And so this is, again, one of the reasons we need to spend time reading our owner's manual. Part 3, the third habit you want to develop if you want to make your photography worse is work hard to ignore the edges of your image when composing. Whatever you do, just keep your eye on the subject. Forget about the rest of the image. And here's why. I'm going to share with you some of my whoopsies, okay? Look in the upper left corner of this image of this greater Roadrunner. This was in a campground. The birds are very used to people. I'm just a few feet away, and I neglected to see the shadow. I think it was a tent or a picnic table in the upper left. Now, yes, we can fix that in post sometimes, and this isn't the best image of composition. But, I want you to see, look, see the smudge up there? Now, can you guys see the difference in these two images? There's something very distracting on the image on the left. Notice that little black smear in the gravel there. Now, that's not, I could have tried changing my position. I probably would have scared the scaled quail here, but that's one we can easily fix in post. But again, starting to learn to read the whole image. when you frame, particularly a landscape frame, boy, make a habit. Maybe you start in the upper right and work all the way around. How many times have you taken an image, got home, and there's a branch, a limb, one blade of grass, something that disrupts the flow of your image? Make sure to begin to look at all the sides of the frame. Here's a boo-boo I did. This was at the Space Coast Birding Festival. We're Wildside. We had a booth there. In fact, it was the last festival we got to go to before everything kind of fell apart. But notice the lower left of my image on the left. Yeah, I had a brush, a shrub, something jump up in the corner. Now you can see the image on the right where I fixed it in post. But you know what? I'd rather have that image right on to begin with. I would rather have the reflections perfect and not have to sit there and clone or fix it. Yes, I know we can, but it's so much better if we capture it correctly in camera, because guess what? Sometimes you can't fix it. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Okay, who can see, and post in the chat really quick. This is with an 8mm fisheye lens. Where's the whoopsies in this image? This is with some clients the other day at the Rio Grande and Nature Trail Overlook. That's the Rio Grande River, Mexico on the left, the Chisos Mountains off in the distance in the background. Does anybody see the whoopsie in this image? Throw it up in chat if you do. I'll give you a couple of seconds here. Nobody? Oh, come on, guys. Somebody's got to see that. If you look in the lower left corner of the image, that is my shirt. That little green wavy thing. Yes, there we go. Yep, Brian. Yep, Kristen, thank you. You got it, guys. Yep, Gabe. That is my shirt. No, it was the shirt there in the corner. You guys are right. Yes, that's right. Several of y'all got it. I was trying out a 4mm fisheye on the Olympus in a camera store the other day. And when I was holding it, I was looking, I'm like, what in the world is in my image there? And I looked, and it was actually my knuckles, because the 4mm is so wide, it could actually see my knuckles gripping the camera. I was like, wow, you really have to pay attention with some lenses. So that's a whoopsie, where later I got back and I went, oh, good grief, my own shirt got in the way. All right, let's talk about habit number 4 to make your photography worse. Whatever you do, only take a couple of shots of each subject or scene. Memory's expensive. It's so hard to get. We don't want to waste, it takes a lot of time in post-processing. I mean, 3 or 4 shots of everything and you should have it nailed, right? Well, that is one way to guarantee that your photography gets worse, because in a lot of situations, particularly this one, this is a black-faced spider monkey on our Amazon riverboat cruise, standing in a skiff with, 11 people or so moving around on a boat, trying to keep the boat still, a spider monkey moving around in the foliage, handheld at 840 millimeters, handheld shooting at 1/500th of a second. I'm violating your typical hand-holding rule, right? 1 over your focal length. Should be your shutter speed and hand-holding, but Olympus has a phenomenal image stabilization system. So I knew I could get away with it. I took over 400 images of this one monkey. I happened to capture one that was tack sharp, handheld, with him making that face. And I love this image. It's one of my top images, I think, coming out of this, out of that workshop. I love it. I love the reflection of the river in his eyes. I love his facial expression. I love the light. I felt like black and white communicated the emotion better than color, but I took over 400 of them. A lot of them are blurry because I'm trying to handhold at a very long focal length, but boy, all it took was that one for me to go, yes, it was worth it. And guys, memory cards, hard drives, I think I've got 4 of them plugged in the back of this iMac. It's cheap. Take lots of shots. Take lots of shots. Capture the hummingbird photography workshops I do. This past summer at my house, in the fall, yes, Gabe, I did say that. If you don't take some photos of that Fuji's hawk in portrait mode, I'm going to slap you. That is true. I did say that. That is not a lie. I did say that. Yes, I did. Well, I get about 7 or 8 species of hummingbirds in the fall, in July, August, and early September. I took over at least 15,000 images. I didn't even add them all up because I deleted a lot of bad ones. 15,000. I did white back and natural backgrounds, and this shot I fell in love with. The colors of Rufous hummingbird male is simply spectacular. And I caught this one, and I was just ecstatic with the fact that it had the black background. That's not photoshopped. I photographed it that way. And I took a lot of images to get that. It was a lot of effort, a lot of work, and a lot of time sitting in a blind. But by taking a lot of images, I managed to get that one that I just fell in love with. I'll be honest, the lightning in this image came out over my head. I probably stood there a little longer than I should, but I always do that with lightning because lightning is incredible. And I love photographing in the summertime here in Big Bend. And Wildside Nature Tours, we do summer storms and starry skies photography workshop in the summer. No, it is not too hot. Yes, it is phenomenal photography in the summer. It's my favorite time of year in Big Bend by far. I set up my tripod. I had 3 different cameras going, and this was one out of a series of over 600 images. I did capture some other lightning images, but none of them went across the sky like this. This is one single capture. This is not, I have stacked images of lightning before. This is not stacked images. This is one shot with that much lightning. The lightning can turn the, I can't remember if it's the nitrogen in the air or what, purple when you get lightning going through it. But it took that many images to capture the one that I really liked. As Gabe mentioned, he's been on some of my winter raptor photography workshops. And if you've ever tried to photograph pronghorn antelope, 99% of the time they run away from you. I had a client, not Gabe. I had another client, and the pronghorn, for whatever reason, started running at us. And I heard him go click, 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 then look at the back of his camera. I'm going click, 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 click. And I said, take pictures. Just take pictures. Quit looking. Just take pictures. One of 63. Some of the images cut off the bottom of the feet. Some the focus snapped onto the neck. But this one had the eye sharp, the feet moving. And when a pronghorn runs at you, you just take a lot of images because that doesn't happen much. You normally have sideways shots or butt shots, something. But when you have a situation that you're not likely to encounter again, I don't care how many shots you take. I don't care if you fill up your card. Take advantage of the opportunity you've been afforded. All right, the 5th habit we need to undertake to make sure our photography gets worse is that whatever you do not want to take a photography class, you don't want to go on a photography workshop, and you definitely don't want to go out with a pro because they're expensive. We are expensive, but darling, we are so worth it. There's a reason it's expensive. It's because we've invested. Kevin's been photographing, is it 40-something years, 50-something? I've been photographing over 30. You are paying so you don't have to spend all the time making all the holy crap terrible images that we made. You're paying us to teach you how to get great images. So if you never want to get better, whatever you do, don't do that. Stay on your own, okay? Don't bother learning. This glass frog, if you could have seen what was actually around this frog, it was anything. It's not night. This was taken probably around 10 in the morning. Bright sun, but I knew how to capture an image of this with a black background. Even though I didn't have a natural black background, I didn't have a fake black background to put up. I knew what to do. I knew how to post-process the image as well. And I got this spectacular shot. In fact, Olympus has used this in one of their promo emails. And it's one of my favorite shots from the Costa Rica photography workshop that Wildside will be doing again next year. And the 60mm macro lens, if you have Olympus and you don't have that lens, that's the best valued lens on the market, hands down. If you want to learn, come out and hang out with some pros. And here's why I tell you this. If you do that, if you go in a workshop, if you take a class, tailgate the pros. Stay with them. I get people wandering off, heading out. Whatever you do, tailgate them. Listen. Ask lots of questions. I have people who apologize before they ask a question. Why are you apologizing? That's what you came for. We feed off your energy when you ask us questions. We spend time learning things so you don't have to spend the same amount of time. So you can come out with us. And that's why you need to go on one of these to make your photography better. Tailgate them. Now, don't be a photo hog. Don't stay on the subject too long. Don't hog all the time. But at dinner, breakfast, lunch, sit close to them. Pepper them with questions. We don't mind. We're adults, and we can say, you know what, I need a little bit of a break if we need to. None of us are ever going to say that because, frankly, I'm always surprised at the lack of questions that some people should be asking or will ask because they think they're being a bother. This is what we do. We love it. Don't hesitate. Here's a great example. We had the best bluebonnet bloom ever in my life in going to Big Bend in 30 years. Mule ears peek in the background. Here's why you should go with a guide, okay? Would you know where to go to photograph these in this 800-something thousand acre park? Or if you go to Yellowstone with us in winter or Glacier or the Amazon, do you know where to go? Probably not. What time of year could you go there? Most people see wildflowers and they think spring, summer. Big Bend bluebonnets start blooming in December and they're pretty much done by the end of March. This was an early March image. Do you know how to balance the bright sky and the darker land? I am not using a filter in this image. There's no graduated neutral density filter, none of that. Do you know how to emphasize the sun's rays? Do you know what to do on a lens to make sure that you get a sunburst? This is a tough image to get, backlit, but boy, it turned out I love one of my favorite images from that bloom. Another one of our summer storms and starry skies experiences here. This is a self-portrait. I do self-portraits in the dark because that's when I look the best. But here's why you go with a guide. Here's why you go on a workshop like this. Would you be at Santa Elena Canyon by yourself at 2 or 3 in the morning? Most people would not, okay? I do it all the time. I don't mind, but most people do not want to be there by themselves. Would you know how to balance the headlamp and the base exposure? We're waiting for the Milky Way, which you see in the upper left corner, to come across the canyon. But I know how to use an app. I know what time of year that's going to look that way. I know when to be there. And I also know when nobody else is going to be down there. So this is one of the reasons why you should, you could come to Big Bend on your own in summer. But do you know the backcountry spots to go to for incredible black and white? Probably not. You might get lucky. Do you know what time of year the sun sets in the window? Probably not. You might get lucky. The time of year most everybody comes to the park, the sun is not setting in the window. Our Amazon riverboat cruise, another one of my favorite shots. You see one of our clients there in the image, and behind him is the boat, the skiff driver, and then the beautiful sun setting above this tributary to the Amazon. Handheld image. Would you know how to balance the ambient light and the artificial light to make sure you captured the sky? This is not a blending of two images. This is direct shot, one exposure. Didn't have to do anything crazy in post-processing, barely any post-processing. Would you know how to get this shot on a skiff that is moving at night? I was sitting there and all of a sudden, basically, I'll tell you how I did this. I had another client hold a very soft flashlight. If you use a high-powered one, a soft flashlight and whatnot to get this image. So this is why you go on a workshop, to learn those techniques. All right, the sixth habit that you need to develop to make your photography worse. Whatever you do, this is really important. Try your best to imitate the style of other photographers. Whatever you do, make sure your images look just like everybody else's. You worry about capturing images like Lee or like Kevin, like Gabe, like I know Chris and David. Whatever you do, copy their style. Let's be honest. Right now, this image of a common nighthawk out near Marfa, this is kind of the style, isn't it? That nice, smooth, creamy bokeh. The color of and if you don't know what bokeh is a nice, smooth, out of focus background. And it does. It makes the image very pretty. This style, Arthur Morris and Alan Murphy and a lot of other great folks shoot. And I love these pictures. Don't get me wrong. I love them. And this, a nice portrait of this nighthawk, it let me get within probably 8 feet. It's perched on a dead tree cholla skeleton. You can see some of the thorns. I mean, perfect. Lighting was great, everything. And I love this shot. But sometimes I get tired of all we see a lot of times are bird portraits with nice blurred bokeh. But that's just one way. If you watch some of the spectacular documentaries on TV, watch how rarely the video actually has this kind of a look to it. There's often branches and it's real life coming into play. Not that this is real life, but you rarely see this. And we still think they're beautiful. So we also want to remember to capture animals too in their natural habitat. So don't look at just my images or look at someone else's or, golly, there's so many great photographers out there that I've learned from. John Shaw was the first photographer who put some books out in the 80s that I started reading. And early on, when we first start, we think, oh, I want to try to capture that. But over time, you'll begin to develop your own style. And you know what? It's okay if your style is different from everybody else's. That's perfectly fine. For example, one thing, I love black and white. I rarely see black and white wildlife images today. But I knew as soon as I saw this image in color, this image bores the crap out of me. Okay. But went to the Galapagos with Wildside, co-leading a workshop. I'll be going again in September. Kevin's been, I think now he's over 40 times to Galapagos. So if you want to go with someone who knows what to do in the Galapagos, yes, Wildside. We spend more time on the islands than anybody else. And as a result, you have time. You're not rushed. I saw these whiskers. You can even see some single particles of sand on those whiskers. And if you look at the image, the hair, the eye, the whiskers all lean to the left in this image. And I minimized the white of the sand, darkened the background so that those whiskers would pop out. And I love black and white, particularly out here in the desert, because it communicates emotion and feeling so much better sometimes than color. So don't be afraid to try converting to black and white. You know what? If it doesn't work, delete X and, delete photo. No problem. But don't be afraid. I love black and white. I don't care if other people like it or not. I love it. Another thing I do a lot is long lens panoramics. As a beginning photographer, one of the bad habits, one of the things I developed that made my photography worse is I believe that grandiose scenes, spectacular big scenes, always warranted a wide angle lens. And nothing could be further from the truth, because what happens with a wide angle lens is it pushes everything away and it makes giant, grandiose, majestic mountains ittle bitty. And sometimes we don't want that. And what I realized is if I learned how to take a long lens and shoot a bunch of images and create a panoramic, I pull the viewer into that scene. It's the same size image I might capture the wide angle, but instead of these mountains or the sun being, little tiny dot, now it takes up a good spot of my frame. This was 22 images I took, horizontal images, handheld. I didn't use I didn't use a tripod with this one. And then I stitched them together in Lightroom. You don't need thousands of dollars worth of additional equipment for your tripod to get great panoramics. And I will be doing a video on how to do long lens panoramics for us in the future using my Olympus equipment. So beautiful image, large megapixel. I could print this up 10 foot by 12 foot and it would look spectacular. Another thing I love to do, and I've had birdwatching friends of mine say, oh, I hate those. I don't care. I love the white background. There was a movement called Meet Your Neighbors, and they wanted to kind of help you see the individuals, not the species, but the individuals. I really like some of the things they did. I don't follow along with all of their requirements, so I don't put up Meet Your Neighbor on my stuff. But I shot black background. I've shot natural background. I love white backgrounds. It draws your attention to the subject itself. In this case, a little female calliope hummingbird visited my house. High-speed flash setup, but I love the white background. There's nothing distracting you from just the bird. You can see the multiple flashes there in her eye. Some people like to clean those up. I do sometimes, but I also kind of like how it reveals what we're doing. So you can get to kind of just see that bird for who she is, not the species, not some field guide, but for who she is. So you may hate them. That's okay. Little secret, why I do the white background? Because I can try to sell an image of a hummingbird with a natural background and nobody's buying it. Nobody's buying it. But if you put it on a white background, interior designers go, oh, darling, that would look so special above the love seat. So there's one reason too I like the white background. All right, guys, the seventh habit. By the way, I've been looking. I haven't seen any questions, some nice compliments and stuff. But guys, I know I'm going quicker. If you want me to slow down, if you got questions, don't hesitate to throw them out. Also, we are recording this, so you'll be able to view this later as well to kind of remember some things. So your seventh habit on how to make your photography worse. And can I just say, if you look at social media, we don't really need a lot more habits on how to make images worse. My gosh, really, we don't need a lot more habits. But if you want to, here we go. The seventh habit, don't ever worry about shutter speed using a tripod or other forms of stability. Handhold, wing it all the time. You'll be just fine. I don't care what your subject is. I don't care how beautiful the scene is, how entertaining the scene is. If what's supposed to be in focus is blurry, it's not a good image unless it's intentional blur, like we're panning along with a bird at a slow shutter speed. That's different. If you're trying to make a sharp image and you're not using it, you're not using your tripod, you're not using a fast enough shutter speed, you're not using a gimbal, whatever it might be, the beanbag, whatever it is, and it's not sharp, just delete it, man. Yes, there's a software out there. I know Topaz, man, it'll help. It fixes little tiny things, not, whoa, holy smoke, mess ups, okay? Georgetown, Texas. I got family there, and Christmas, their square is one of the neatest squares in Texas. Great spot to go photograph Christmas. Live bulb mode in Olympus actually lets you watch your image develop. You know when to stop it. And so I put it on a tripod. I stopped my lens down to f/16 or greater because I wanted to get the star burst, the light burst on all the Christmas lights. And I started my image, put on a tripod. I'm not touching it. I'm using a remote, an intervalometer. And an intervalometer does a lot of things. Some cameras have some of them built in. I use a separate one at times because you can program it for exact seconds, minutes, things like that. Start it. I'm watching the back of my camera. Wait till I like it. Watch my histogram. Boom. Stop it at 7.2 seconds. Does that tell you I'm using live bulb? Nobody puts in 7.2 seconds on their own. So I watched it develop. I stopped it. Tack sharp, beautiful. And I really like the way that image turned out. Here's a long lens panoramic. Yes, I handhold some. This is the Davis Mountains. I live up in the upper right side of that image up high. And I had to use 1/13 of a second. And I'm shooting at 320 millimeters. So 320 millimeters at 1/13 of a second. Odds are I was not going to capture 21 images tack sharp. So I put on a tripod. I try to overlap at least 25% or more. And I just rotated my camera, took a shot. Then I got to the end of the row, stitched it together in Lightroom. 1/13 of a second. I went out to photograph birds, but the light was too beautiful. I stopped for a while to capture that shot. And again, if I had not used a tripod, that image wouldn't work. That image would be blurry at some point in there. Our Amazon Riverboat Cruise photography workshop on the first day when we're heading towards Iquitos, we went on a trail through the white sand forest, which is spectacular for macro photography. Kevin will tell you, I didn't even shoot. I don't think I photographed a bird. Bill says he's getting no sound on his computer. Kevin, can you help him with that maybe? On this turtle-headed ant, which is, maybe a half an inch at most, he was on a tree trunk, and I knew, even though I'm using a flash and 1/250th is more than sufficient to stop everything, I rested my elbow, or my upper arm, I rested it against the tree. And doing so, I was able to really hold still. And as you can see, because Olympus has such because it's a micro four thirds camera, we get a greater depth of field. This isn't focus stacking. This is one shot at f11. That really helped me hold that lens tight and still and get a nice sharp shot of a very unique looking, crazy head on that turtle. On that ant. Hand holding. All right. Since some of you don't want to mess with a tripod, and realistically, if you want to tremendously improve your landscape photography at a minimum, you should start using a tripod. And in certain situations, use a monopod, because not every camera system has 7.5 stops of image stabilization. On this image, the Olympus has a built-in live neutral density filter. One of those kind of things like, oh my gosh, it's incredible. So I wanted to blur the water. You can't take a tripod on this little narrow walkway. So I knew I had to hand hold it. And I took a 2.5 second image, hand holding. Now there was a little bar coming down on this walkway that keeps you from falling into the waterfall here because you're back in this little slot canyon type thing. So I leaned up against that. And again, Olympus has a phenomenal image stabilization. 2.5 second image handheld. And I guarantee you, I've zoomed in. Those rocks around that are tack sharp. The water's nice and creamy. I was at 14 millimeters there, which is the equivalent of 28 on a 35 millimeter camera. If you're going to hand hold and you insist on doing it a lot, please look at the proper hand holding technique. Notice how the elbows are in, not chicken style. I see so many people, again, let's go back to I see people holding full-size DSLRs using the silly screen on the back, going click, 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 click. That's useless. I mean, I guarantee it's useless. Instead, take your arms and bring them in as tight to your side as you can. I like to pull the camera into my face as tight as I can. That makes me, the more you can make you and the camera one, then that will help stabilize it, okay? Then, again, lean in, elbows together, and pull them into your chest. And if you have to take a breath, blow out, fire some shots. If you insist on doing hand-holding in moments when you shouldn't. Here, I would have loved to have had a tripod, but it wasn't allowed. So I had to do that. Again, I took a lot of images. Not all of them were like this. Not all of them are sharp, but all it takes is one, just one. Okay, habit number 8 to make your photography worse. Whatever you do, never move your autofocus point from the middle, or, God forbid, even more advanced, change your autofocus mode. Okay? I'm going to tell you one of the things that is one of the skills that pros utilize, and it will make all the difference in the world in your photography. Are you ready? You need to be able to move your autofocus point from as far left to as far right and as far up to as far down without pulling your face away from the camera. And you need to be able to change your autofocus mode. That usually has to do with the number of points without looking, without pulling your face away and staring. Because sometimes you're going to have a bird perched, or you're going to be focused on something. All of a sudden, you see something flying out of the corner of your eye, or some animal running, and suddenly what you've been using isn't going to work for what's happening. And you've got to make that adjustment. Or you've got your focus point on the far left, or you've got it in the middle. Let's be honest. Where do most people have it? Right in the middle. You know how we can tell? Because you can tell by looking at images, because everything is centered. But they have it in the middle, and the warbler's hopping left, and the focus locks on the wing, and they're at 7.1 f-stop, and the eye starts to be out of focus because you're focused on the wing. You need to be able to get that focus point onto that eye, moving it left. Oh, the bird hopped it. It's going the other way. Now I need to move it right. You need to be able to move up. You need to be able to move down. You never know what's going to happen. A buffalo is looking up once, and then all of a sudden he lowers his head to graze. He'll move up and down, not moving my camera, not trying to change where I'm at, or not necessarily just center focusing and then recomposing, because if he's moving his head, in Yellowstone in the winter, one of the things we watch is, boy, those buffaloes, they'd take those big heads and they would move that snow out of the way so they could graze. It's not going to work, But what we have to do is, in this image, one of the beautiful things about the Galapagos Islands, which ruins you for photographing anywhere else, is that the animals are all so close to you that you get spoiled. And in this case, I'm using a 40 to 150. I'm at 95 millimeters on this lens with a doubler. And this is a juvenile red-footed booby, that beautiful downy feathers, and those gorgeous colored eyes, that gray smoky eyes. If you saw this on Tinder, you'd swipe right with this guy. Well, if I'd left my autofocus point in the middle, we'd have had a really sharp end of the bill, and the eyes would be blurry. But by moving my focus point just a couple to the right, I was able to focus on the eyes, and I wanted the depth of field as such to create the eye sharp and part of the bill, but I wanted that part closest to us out of focus, so it's not what's drawing our attention. So just a couple of movements to the right, click, 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 I got my image. On hummingbirds, sometimes, single point, if you're fast enough to keep that on a flying hummingbird, then good for you. I tend to use either the cross, which is a total, I think, of 5 points, 3 across and then 2 additional up and down, or I'll use the 9 points, the 3 side-by-side square. Because I am trying to capture, we're photographing birds are moving so fast. You can't worry. You can try to get it on the eye. I will often move my thing up just a little bit to try to capture on the head, but you can do that with a bird moving so fast that I just want to try to capture it and hope that the key parts are in focus. Well, with my high-speed flash setup using the black background that I was using, I managed to capture this picture of a honeybee. This is not Photoshop. You can see the raw file. This honeybee was starting to try to sting the hummingbird, and the hummingbird is backing up going, okay, I give. So I know how bad a bee sting hurts us. I can't imagine what it would do to a bird that size. So I managed to capture this using the 9-point, the 9-point thing. Just a second. Nope. Sorry. I told my stepson not to come in. I got to be the mean stepdad sometimes. So I got this nice black background and this beautiful bee starting to sting the hummingbird. My Galapagos Islands photography workshop. I did not want the head centered in this image. I knew I wanted it to be kind of more of a panoramic type look. I wanted the head slightly off centered. Bill asked, can't you do that with back button and recomposing? Yes, you can in certain situations, but that you are not going to be fast enough to do that with a moving warbler, with an animal that's moving around a lot. Yes, if I've got a bird perched, if I've got an astrodid flycatcher sitting vertically and it's perched, then yeah, I can focus on his eye and I can recompose. But when I've got a warbler or a vireo or a Klima warbler foraging, I am not very likely to be able to focus and recompose. So that's why that's so important. Yes, in some circumstances, I do back button focus, recompose. But in a lot of other circumstances, that won't work. So here I want to focus on the slightly off-centered head. On the Amazon Riverboat Cruise photography workshop, this image of these skimmers, it was a backlit situation, and I knew it was going to produce some silhouettes. I use single point a lot. I use the bigger single point a lot on my Olympus, but I knew with these birds flying that I wanted to have a little better shot. So again, on the fly, I've been using single points. I've been doing some perched silhouettes. I wanted to change to be able to use a larger autofocus number of points. Again, I went to 9 just to make sure that I would get that shot in focus. The 9th habit to make sure your images get worse. Whatever you do, only focus on learning your camera. You can ignore post-processing. You're not going to need it. It's all magic, foo-foo. You like to say that your image comes straight out of camera. Hint, there is no such thing. Either your camera is applying some processing or you are. I would rather be in charge of how my picture looks than my camera. So ignore post-processing. You don't need it. Just download your images and share them on social media. You'll be fine. Well, here's an example of shooting a snake, a tricolored hognose snake, not native to North America. This was a friend of mine. Shot in a white box. And for some reason, I had a little bit of funky stuff going on around the back. The crease, and at that time, I was using a fiberboard white box. The crease showed up. Well, in post-processing, you can see how nicely that image cleaned up. I could enhance the shadow of the snake. I could brighten the white from that gray to more of a white. Got rid of that seam. Made the white consistent across. So I wouldn't even share that top image, but the bottom one I love. Converting to black and white, you better learn how to post-process. This image in color is very boring to me. The sky's blah. I like the shadows. By the way, the sand, the winds were blowing above 30 miles an hour. The Olympus did spectacular. I had no sand in it. I had a Sony a7 III with me. And within a few minutes, there was so much sand inside that body with the lens on that I couldn't use it. I just set it on a tripod and left it back. But I was changing lenses with the Olympus. I'm sitting out here, and I knew I wanted this image to be high key. And boy, in the black and white, by knowing Silver Efex Pro, I like Silver Efex Pro better than Lightroom. And I found that by spending the time learning how to use that software, I've really been able to enhance my black and white images from before when all I used was Lightroom. All right, went up in the Chisos Mountains. I often do a Klima warbler tour, and about a 10-mile minimum hike, 1,700-foot elevation gain at the beginning. If you want to see Klima warblers, that's what you have to do. And there was a slate-throated redstart up there this past year. Hopefully he's there this year. Can't go check right now. But very lucky to capture some images. Had I had my original system 600mm monster lens, I promise I would not have had these images, only because I was able to handhold such a long focal length with my Olympus system was I really able to get these images by hiking that far with a lighter system. But you can see in the original image, I got a little flash eye going on. The flash was a little hot. There's some really bright spots in the background. There's a branch protruding from the top. I didn't like the orientation. Well, in editing in Lightroom, I rotated the picture. I was able to tone down those bright highlights in the background. I brought the exposure from the flash down a bit. I corrected the eye. I got rid of that one branch that was kind of coming down towards the head. And now I have an image that I really love. Same bird, same exposure, same everything, but I was able to fix it in post-processing to an image that I really liked. Once a year at the Fort Davis National Historic Site here near where I live, they do a lantern tour, which is amazing. Only once a year, and I always pick the 2 times that are right around sunset, so I can have a little bit of light, but be able to use flash or low light at times. So a friend of mine, Matt Walter, does these. He's a phenomenal historian, and we're walking through the hallways of the old hospital on this grounds. The first image, and I'm already bent down low. I'm holding my camera out in front of me because he's walking. So there's no tripod. There's no stabilization other than me and a higher shutter speed. I'm holding the camera down low with the LCD lens flipped out so I can see. And so as I'm walking along, I'm taking pictures. And this was the brightest image I was able to capture. And it's one of the few where the lantern was a good spot. The exposure on it was nice. And so I went into Lightroom and I brightened it up. Well, Lee, there's some noise. Yes. And in this circumstance, the noise makes this image even creepier. I mean, you're in the old hallway of a Indian fort and a Civil War fort. I mean, the light reflecting here, the red in the front is more enhanced. The light coming in the side doors is more enhanced. And it makes the image more of a shining type feel to it, to me. So that is one instance where editing really made a difference in my image. Corey has a question. Will you describe the flash system you use off camera, Fresnel? I am going to answer that when I get to my question time, Corey. Corey, I'm sorry. That's a good question, and I will answer that. I'll make sure I come back to that because it's different for different circumstances. So let's go to the last habit that you need to develop to make your photography worse. All right, here we go. Number 10. By now, you should be honing in on how to make your image the worst possible if you implement all 10 of these habits. Always leave your camera in auto or program mode. I mean, that's what these $3,000, $5,000, $1,000 camera bodies are best at, is just doing it all on their own. But here's the reality of it. Any professional photographer will tell you this. When we were beginning photographers, we thought our cameras were brilliant. But the fact is your camera, regardless of brand, type, is pretty stupid in a lot of situations. You are way smarter than it. You just don't realize it yet. You just haven't developed the skills and knowledge to be smarter. So I'm going to share some images with you that your camera in auto or program mode is probably going to blow it. Unless you know a little bit about spot metering and putting your autofocus in the right spot. But for the most part, your camera is going to really mess up on these images. Here's a good example of a backlit strawberry cactus on one of the back roads in Big Bend National Park. Sun coming up over the Sierra del Carmen Mountains in Mexico, shining across. I love the way cactus spines are when they're backlit in that grass. And the beauty of that is you're capturing that, and I have just enough detail in the foreground to bring the picture to life. Most time you use auto mode, your sky's going to be correct, and the foreground's going to be messed up. The foreground might be properly exposed and the sky will be blown out. So just know this is a perfect example of where that's not going to work. Program mode is never going to get snow right. If you want white snow, you better know what you need to do. If you're going to be fine with gray snow, then program mode is going to work really well. When you go with this to Yellowstone in winter, I know Gabe is signed up for that. You have to automatically overexpose to make your snow white. You have to. You just have to. There's no other way around it because your camera wants to try to make snow 18% gray. So you have to go in there and make some adjustments, whether you're shooting in manual or aperture priority. We all do it. You have to do it. This buffalo would not have been properly exposed. The background wouldn't have properly been exposed. The snow would have been bad. So this is one time where your camera is not going to get it right. How about a golden eagle in flight? How about one coming so close it fills the frame? Program mode, you will have a real nice silhouette of a golden eagle. You will not be able to see any of the details on the tail, on the body, on the feathers. This is a subadult golden eagle. And here you can actually make out all the detail underneath, because I knew that I was going to have to significantly overexpose this image to make sure that the bottom, the sun, as you can see, is coming in there on the upper right of this bird. And you can see that. It would have just been a shadow if I had not intentionally overexposed according to the camera's meter. So I was shooting in manual and made those adjustments. Either way, manual, aperture, doesn't matter. You just have to know you have to make those adjustments. So here's another example. This is a client, a friend of mine from Minnesota. He wanted to come down to Big Bend and Bird. This is August, one of my favorite times of year to photograph there. And I knew I wanted the starburst coming off his glasses. I wanted a little bit of detail in his hat, his head, and his shirt, but I did not want to blow out the sky. So again, another example where your camera, he's either going to be a silhouette and the sky will be nice, or he will be exposed, what we might say properly, which wouldn't be proper for this image, and then the sky will be all blown out. So this is another circumstance where you have to be in charge to make sure that your image comes out correctly the way you want it. Okay. So again, if you want to make your photography even worse, stick with auto or program mode. Now, I want to take a minute and answer some of your questions. I've already got a couple up here that are asking me about flash systems with macro. With macro, I am currently using Quangren, Quangren twin flash. It's a Chinese brand. I don't think it'll give you the virus, but some people have had bad luck with them. I never have. Mine have worked great. Olympus has a system that I'm hoping to try out that I don't like my flashes close to my lens for macro. I want it back and away so I can diffuse it more. So I make a homemade diffuser, and I'll be doing a video on this. So I do use a twin flash, but it's different. It has arms that you can move and fold and bend. I think Laowa, the manufacturer who does a lot of those funky lenses, is the one who makes that flash. I will occasionally, for bird photography, I will try to use a camera, a flash off camera. I'll be getting some Olympus flashes to use. I currently use a Godox with a lithium battery. That lithium battery lasts a long time. I've used manual Godox flashes for high-speed Humminbird setups. They're about $60. Hard to beat the price. And if you could throw 10 of them and still be cheaper than a Canon flash. So I've been using those. I really hope to try the Olympus flashes because they're smaller, they're more compact, and I think they're going to put out the same amount of light. So when it comes to traveling, I think they're going to be better because they're not as big and heavy. So I use different flashes, sometimes off camera, on, just depends, on what I'm shooting. But hopefully that answers your flash questions. Any other questions, guys? Anybody else have anything that you want to ask? You got a chance right now. While I'm waiting on that, I'll share with you, again, this webinar was brought to you free by Wildside Nature Tours and Kevin. I will be going back to the Galapagos with Kevin in September 2021. He has other trips between now and then as well, does several a year. We'll be having an Ecuadorian Humminbird workshop near that as well. We'll be going back to Yellowstone in winter in January 2021. We got our Amazon riverboat cruise, which is spectacular. I cannot tell you. We had 8 species of primates, including owl monkeys, which are very hard to see, much less photograph. Glacier, Big Bend, Panama. If you want to work on your macro photography, Panama would be outstanding for that. Costa Rica. So got a variety of workshops and tours we'll be offering coming up. And then I know Kevin has a special offer, guys. I'm going to put this slide up, and I'm going to let Kevin, why don't you tell them about the offer you have today?
Yep, I'm just about to post it now. And so what we're going to do, let's see, did that post?
Yes. It's taken away. It's covering this. It's up to the upper screen.
Yeah, let me double check that again.
And while you're working on that, I see Kristen. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Kristen Yes. Yeah, there we go. Down there on the lower left, guys, Kevin has an offer to get a $500 travel certificate for just $400. And that is going to be for a full week. You'll have that chance to grab that. But I want to hit Kristen's question because it's really good. Any chance we can have a workshop webinar on how you post-process? Too funny you should say that. I was just talking with Kevin an hour ago. We will do, I'm going to do a multi-part series on Lightroom CC for wildlife and landscape photography. Keep an eye on these webinars on the Wildside website or on our Big Marker channel. I'm going to do a multi-part series on Lightroom CC for wildlife and landscape editing. And the last session will also include you being able to send, prior to that session, you'll be able to send me some of your images, and I'll be able to critique and even edit them for you. You can send me how you edit it. I might show you how I do it differently. So be watching for that. We're going to have a special price on that. Be 5 or 6 sessions at least, and I'll spread them out a little bit so you'll have time to do one and then practice and learn. So, yes, that will be happening very soon. April's asking how it's going to affect our schedule. You know, I know Kevin's been talking about trying to get trips back and going as soon as possible. We have had to cancel a few. If you've got a deposit on a trip and we have to move it back, you're getting full credit on that. You know, if you want to go on the trip in the future. So I would definitely email Kevin and ask him about specifics on specific trips. Several of y'all
needs to be handled differently depending on when it is, and you know, basically we deal with all our suppliers that we send lots of money to long before the trip, so we got to work with them to make sure that we can forward those credits. And it's been a lot of work, but everyone has been very gracious in helping us out with getting that done. So you know, most of our trips that were coming up very quickly are being postponed, and we're getting full credits for folks to go on those trips. But again, every trip is being handled differently, and it's a long, hard process with many hours on hold. Yes. But in the meantime, you know, we have the webinars. I've got a few other free webinars coming up that I'll mention about some of my favorite birds and wildlife of Central America, as well as conservation tourism, how, you know, your travel dollars help us to help communities in other locations. And I'll be doing some talk about a little more in-depth about photography and exposure with my light shadow background workshops coming up as well. So keep an eye out on all the webinars. We've got a whole bunch of stuff coming up.
And I'll say, Wayne, you asked, do all the guides with Wildside use primarily Olympus equipment? Yes, because of its small size and portability. The birding guides, it's perfect for them because it takes up so much less space. Traveling with it, you know, before I had a huge Pelican case and you'd have to pay extra travel fees, and we can put all that same amount now in a much smaller area. And it's so much lighter. The image quality is spectacular. You can handhold it in situations that you're not handholding a full frame. So, yes, all the guides that I know of are definitely using Olympus. Lots of great comments. Thank you all very much. I had a great time. If you think of a question later, you see our websites, Instagram, Facebook, please, please, please feel free to send us an email, text us, whatever, call us a question. We're happy to answer, and that's what we're here for. So like Kevin said, lots more webinars coming up. I think with that, I'm going to say goodbye. I appreciate all your kind compliments, and I look forward to seeing many of y'all at our next webinar. Thank you.
Excellent. Definitely. Thank you guys very much for joining us. And this webinar will be recorded and will be posted very, very soon. So keep an eye out for that. And again, any questions at all, do not hesitate to contact us. So with that, let's sign out, Lee. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye, guys.